Most gardeners water their plants every day and wonder why their harvest is disappointing. It feels like the right thing to do. Plants need water. More frequent watering means more water. More water means better growth. The logic seems sound until you look at what is actually happening in the soil beneath your plants, and realize that daily shallow watering is producing exactly the wrong kind of root system for the kind of plant growth that produces real harvests. Here is what the Amish figured out a long time ago. Plants do not grow toward what is always available. They grow toward what requires effort to reach. A plant that receives a small amount of water at the surface every day develops a shallow root system that stays near the surface where the moisture is. A plant that receives a deep soaking every few days develops roots that chase the moisture downward, deep into the soil where temperatures are cooler, where moisture lasts longer, and where the plant can access the soil's full nutritional profile rather than just the depleted surface layer. The difference between those two root systems is the difference between a plant that struggles through a hot week and a plant that barely notices it. Amish gardeners have managed water the same way for generations, deeply, infrequently, with heavy mulch protecting the soil surface in between. The result is gardens that produce through dry stretches, develop strong, vigorous plants, and require less total water than the daily shallow watering most people practice. Today, I am going to show you exactly 5 methods that make this work. By the end of this video, you are going to understand not just what to do differently, but why the change produces better results. Kneel down and push your hand into the soil of a well-managed Amish garden bed in the middle of a July afternoon, and what you feel surprises most visitors. Cool, damp. Not wet, not waterlogged, but consistently moist several inches down, despite the fact that the air temperature is in the mid-80s and the surface has not been watered since 2 days ago. The thick straw mulch covering the soil between the plants has been holding that moisture in, slowing evaporation, keeping the soil temperature stable, and creating the consistent growing conditions that the plant roots growing through it are thriving inside. The garden beds look different from a conventionally managed backyard garden. The soil surface is almost invisible beneath the mulch layer. The plants emerge from a surface that looks protected rather than exposed. There is almost no bare ground anywhere in the growing area. Every inch is either planted or mulched or both. That visual tells the whole story. The Amish do not fight water loss. They prevent it. They do not compensate for shallow roots by watering constantly. They build deep roots by watering correctly from the beginning. The philosophy behind every water management decision is the same one that governs the rest of Amish farming. Work with the natural system rather than against it. The soil wants to hold moisture. The plant wants to grow deep roots. The mulch wants to break down into organic matter. Give each of these things the conditions to do what they naturally do, and the garden takes care of most of the work itself. What if your garden could survive a 2-week dry stretch without stress? And what if getting it to that point required only 2 changes to how you currently water? Here is the first method. Deep, infrequent watering, training plant roots to grow downward where moisture and nutrients are most concentrated. Amish gardeners water deeply and infrequently, rather than shallowly and daily. In practical terms, this means applying enough water at each watering session to penetrate 8 to 12 inches into the soil, enough to reach the lower root zone where soil temperature is more stable and moisture retention is higher, and then waiting until the top 2 to 3 inches of soil have dried before watering again. For most gardens in summer conditions, this means watering thoroughly every 2 to 4 days, depending on soil type, plant size, and temperatures rather than the daily light watering that most gardeners default to. Each watering session is longer and more thorough than a daily watering. A slow, deep soaking rather than a quick surface wetting. The sound of water being applied correctly to an Amish garden bed is slow and steady. Not the quick spray of a surface wetting, but the patient application of water that is being given time to penetrate downward rather than run off sideways. The soil surface darkens and then the water disappears as it moves into the soil profile. That disappearance is the signal that the water is going where it needs to go. A tomato plant that has been deep watered from its first week in the ground develops a root system that extends 12 to 18 inches downward by midsummer, accessing the stable moisture and mineral nutrition of the lower soil profile that shallow-rooted plants never reach. During a 10-day dry stretch that stress damages shallow-rooted plants in neighboring gardens, this deep-rooted plant continues producing without visible stress because its root system is accessing moisture that surface evaporation has not reached. Amish gardeners have observed and relied on this difference for generations. The understanding that the investment of thorough watering early in the season pays back through the dry stretches that every summer eventually produces. Plant roots grow toward moisture. A plant that receives water consistently at the surface grows its roots toward the surface, in the top 2 to 4 inches where the moisture is. When the surface dries between waterings, those shallow roots have no reserve to draw on, and the plant shows stress rapidly. A plant that receives deep watering grows roots toward the depth where the moisture was delivered. Those deep roots access a much larger volume of soil moisture during dry periods and maintain productive growth through conditions that damage shallow-rooted plants. The watering method shapes the root system. The root system determines the plant's drought resilience. Switching from daily shallow watering to deep watering every 2 to 4 days typically reduces total water use while improving plant performance simultaneously. A less frequent watering also reduces the time you spend in the garden managing irrigation, a genuine practical benefit for anyone managing a kitchen garden alongside other responsibilities. Tomorrow morning, water one of your garden beds differently than you normally do. Apply water slowly at the base of the plants, not the leaves, for twice as long as your normal watering session. Then do not water that bed again until the top 2 to 3 inches of soil have dried out when you push your finger into it. Observe the plants at the end of the week compared to beds watered normally. The difference in plant vigor is usually visible within 4 to 7 days of switching to the correct method. What if the single most effective thing you could do to reduce how often you need to water your garden cost less than $5 and took less than 30 minutes to apply? That is the second method. Deep straw mulching, creating the moisture barrier that makes deep watering work through the full interval between waterings. Amish gardeners apply straw mulch to their garden beds at a depth of 4 to 6 inches, not the thin decorative inch that most gardeners apply, but a genuine insulating layer thick enough to dramatically reduce evaporation from the soil surface. This mulch layer is applied immediately after planting and replenished through the season as it compresses and partially decomposes. The straw used in Amish gardens is typically wheat or oat straw, the dry, stemmy material left after grain harvest, available inexpensively from local farms. It is applied loosely around the base of plants and between rows, leaving a small clear circle directly around each stem to prevent stem rot from moisture trapped against the plant base. The rest of the soil surface is covered completely. An Amish garden bed in midsummer with a full mulch layer looks like the soil has been tucked in, a thick golden covering over the dark soil beneath. The plants emerging from it with the clean, healthy look of roots that are not being stressed by surface temperature fluctuations or rapid moisture loss. A garden bed with 4 to 6 inches of straw mulch loses moisture through evaporation at a fraction of the rate of an unmulched bed in the same conditions. In typical summer heat, an unmulched bed may require watering every 1 to 2 days to maintain consistent soil moisture in the top 6 inches. The same bed with deep straw mulch typically requires watering every 3 to 5 days to maintain the same moisture level, a reduction in watering frequency of 50 to 70% with no reduction in the moisture available to plant roots. A single bale of wheat straw costing $3 to $5 provides enough material to mulch approximately 60 to 80 square feet of garden bed at the correct depth. Soil moisture is lost primarily through evaporation at the soil surface, the interface between the soil and the warm, dry air above it. A thick mulch layer eliminates this interface. The air above the mulch is warm and dry. The soil beneath the mulch maintains a stable microclimate, cooler, more humid, and protected from the direct solar radiation that drives surface evaporation. The deeper the mulch layer, the more complete this protection. At 4 to 6 inches of depth, the protection is substantial enough to reduce evaporative moisture loss by 50% or more compared to bare soil in the same conditions. Heavy mulching reduces watering frequency, reduces weeding labor by suppressing weed germination at the soil surface, moderate soil temperature during heat waves that stress shallow-rooted plants, and adds organic matter to the soil as it decomposes through the season. For a backyard gardener managing a kitchen garden alongside a full schedule, The reduction in watering and weeding time that consistent mulching produces is as practically valuable as any other single garden management change. Buy 1 bale of wheat straw this week. Apply it to your most moisture-sensitive beds, tomatoes, squash, cucumbers, peppers, at a depth of 4 to 6 inches around the base of the plants. Leave a small clear circle around each stem. Cover the soil between plants completely. Water the bed immediately after mulching to settle the straw and wet the soil beneath it. Observe the moisture level in the mulched bed versus an unmulched bed after 3 days of similar weather. On what if the time of day you water your garden was making your watering less effective and your plants more vulnerable to disease? And what if switching to a different time cost nothing and improved both outcomes simultaneously? That is the third method. Early morning watering. Timing water application to work with the plant's daily cycle rather than against it. Amish gardeners water in the early morning, typically within the first hour after sunrise. The reasons for this timing are practical and understood through generations of observation rather than modern agricultural research, though the research confirms what observation found. Morning watering means the water applied reaches the root zone as the plant enters its active growth period for the day, and the soil is still cool from the overnight temperature drop, absorbing water more effectively than heat-stressed afternoon soil that can cause rapid runoff at the surface before the water penetrates. The plant leaves are dry before the highest disease pressure period of the day, and the water applied in the morning has the full day to move through the soil profile to the root zone rather than sitting at the surface where evening or night watering leaves it. A garden in early morning light just after watering has a specific quality. The soil dark and evenly moistened, the air still cool, the leaves clean and dry, the plants beginning the day with full access to the water and nutrients their root systems can access from well-moistened soil. That is the optimal starting condition for a productive day of plant growth. Evening watering, the default for many working gardeners who cannot be in the garden at any other time, leaves water on plant leaves and at the soil surface through the night. In cool, damp conditions, this extended leaf wetness creates ideal conditions for the fungal diseases that cause blight in tomatoes, mildew in squash and cucumbers, and leaf spot in a range of other vegetables. Amish gardeners who water consistently in the morning report significantly lower fungal disease pressure than gardeners in the same area watering in the evening, a difference that compounds through the season as disease-free plants maintain full leaf area and productive growth into the late season. Plant disease organisms, particularly fungal pathogens, require extended moisture on leaf surfaces to germinate and penetrate plant tissue. Morning watering allows any inadvertent splash on leaves to dry quickly in the warming morning air and direct sunlight. Evening watering keeps that moisture on leaves through the night when temperatures are lowest, evaporation is slowest, and the conditions for fungal germination are most favorable. The Amish have practiced morning watering for generations because the results, healthier plants with lower disease pressure, are observable and consistent regardless of whether the underlying biology is understood. If your schedule makes morning watering impossible consistently, the next best alternative is watering at the base of plants only, using a slow drip or soaker hose at soil level that keeps foliage completely dry regardless of the time of day. Some of the Amish also water at the base rather than overhead when possible, specifically to reduce leaf wetness. The time of day matters. Where the water goes matters equally. Move your next 3 watering sessions to early morning if your schedule allows it at all. If morning watering is genuinely impossible this week, focus on watering at the soil base rather than overhead. A watering can applied directly at the stem base or a soaker hose rather than an overhead sprinkler. Both changes reduce leaf wetness and fungal disease pressure regardless of time. What if a completely free water source was literally falling on your property every time it rained and flowing away unused while you paid for municipal water to irrigate your garden? That is the fourth method. On rainwater collection, capturing the free water resource that falls on every property and storing it for garden use. Amish farms use rain barrels and simple collection systems to capture rainwater from roof runoff and store it for garden irrigation during dry periods. The basic system is straightforward: a 55-gallon barrel or larger tank positioned beneath a downspout with a simple screen over the inlet to filter debris and a spigot near the base for attaching a hose or filling a watering can. A typical Amish farm with several barn and outbuilding roof areas can collect 50 to 100 gallons of water from a single moderate rainfall event. Water that would otherwise flow into the ground or drainage system and be unavailable for garden use. Multiple collection points across the property can accumulate several hundred gallons during a rainy week, enough to supply a substantial garden through the dry days that follow. The sight of rain barrels lined up along the south wall of an Amish garden, shed in late spring, is practical and purposeful. Wooden or plastic barrels connected to the downspouts above them, their lids on to prevent mosquito breeding, the overflow directed to a garden bed rather than away from it. Everything falling on this property has a purpose. A modest rainwater collection system with two 55-gallon barrels on a small property collects 100 gallons from a 1-inch rainfall event, the equivalent of approximately 10 minutes of municipal hose watering at typical residential flow rates. Through a growing season with regular rainfall, this system can supply a significant portion of a kitchen garden's irrigation needs at zero ongoing cost. The initial investment in 2 rain barrels, screens, and spigot hardware is typically under $50 and is recovered in reduced water bills within 1 growing season for most households. Rainwater differs from municipal tap water in ways that matter to garden plants. Municipal water is treated with chlorine and sometimes fluoride, chemicals that benefit human health, but have measurable effects on soil microbial populations at the concentrations used. Rainwater contains no treatment chemicals and has a slightly acidic pH that is closer to the optimal range for most vegetable crops than the alkaline pH common in municipal water supplies. The Amish collect rainwater because it is free, because it is better for the soil than treated municipal water, and because building water independence is part of the broader self-sufficiency philosophy that governs every resource management decision on the farm. A single 55-gallon rain barrel connected to 1 downspout is the simplest possible entry point to rainwater collection. It requires no plumbing skill, minimal tools, and less than 2 hours to install. The reduction in municipal water use it produces depends on your garden size and local rainfall patterns, but even a single barrel makes a measurable contribution during dry stretches when garden water demand is highest. Identify the downspout closest to your garden this week. Measure the distance from the downspout to the garden area. Order or locate a 55-gallon barrel with a screen and spigot. That is the research and planning for a system you can install in 1 afternoon this month. The next rainfall will test it for you. What if the soil your plants are growing in could be permanently improved to hold moisture longer between waterings, reducing your irrigation needs across every growing season from this point forward? That is the 5th method. Compost-based soil improvement. Building soil structure that holds moisture naturally and reduces watering requirements permanently. Amish gardeners apply finished compost to their garden beds every season, working 2 to 3 inches of well-finished compost into the top 6 inches of soil before planting each spring. This annual compost application gradually transforms the physical structure of the soil in a way that improves moisture retention year after year, rather than requiring ongoing inputs to maintain. The compost adds organic matter, the decomposed plant and animal material that creates the sponge-like structure in healthy soil that absorbs water rapidly and releases it slowly to plant roots. A soil with 5% organic matter content holds significantly more plant-available water than a soil with 1% organic matter. And the difference is measurable in both watering frequency and plant drought resilience. Finished compost ready for spring garden application smells of the best possible soil, the cool, dark, slightly sweet smell of material that has been transformed from kitchen scraps and garden trimmings into something rich enough to visibly improve any soil it is added to. Working a wheelbarrow of finished compost into a garden bed before planting is one of the most satisfying and productive things a gardener does all year. A garden bed that has received annual compost applications for 5 consecutive seasons develops a soil structure noticeably different from its original condition. The color is darker. The texture is looser. Water applied to the surface penetrates immediately rather than pooling. The soil remains moist at depth for a day longer after each watering than it did in its first season. And these improvements compound with each passing season, each year's compost application building on the previous year's contribution until the soil's moisture-holding capacity has improved dramatically from its starting point. Amish families who have been gardening the same beds for 20 and 30 years have soil that holds moisture through conditions that would stress plants in newly broken ground. Organic matter in soil acts physically like a sponge. It absorbs water during wetting events and releases it slowly to plant roots during dry periods. Each 1% increase in soil, organic matter content increases the soil's water-holding capacity by approximately 20,000 gallons per acre. A significant improvement at garden scale when expressed as days of additional moisture availability between waterings. Compost also improves soil structure in ways that reduce runoff during heavy watering and rainfall, allowing more water to penetrate and less to be lost from the surface. Annual compost application is the single most effective long-term water management investment available to any gardener. Start a compost pile now if you do not have one. Every kitchen vegetable scrap, wilted lettuce, carrot tops, overripe tomatoes, outer cabbage leaves, every garden trimming, every dried leaf, every layer of chicken bedding is raw material for the soil amendment that will permanently improve your garden's moisture retention. The compost that starts this fall becomes the spring amendment that begins improving your soil's water-holding capacity from the first application. Collect your kitchen vegetable scraps for the next 7 days and start a compost pile. A simple 3-sided enclosure of pallets or wire fencing in a convenient corner is all you need. The pile that starts this week will be producing the spring amendment that begins improving your soil's water management from the first season it is applied. I want to tell you about the summer I watered my garden every single day and still ended up with small, underwhelming plants. I had a kitchen garden, about 200 square feet, that I was genuinely trying to manage well. I watered every evening when I got home from work, a good 20 to 30 minutes with the hose, covering everything thoroughly from above. The soil surface was always moist. The plants always looked adequately watered. By midsummer, the plants were not doing what I expected. Seed, they were alive. They were producing something, but the tomatoes were smaller than the ones at the farmer's market. The beans were thin. When a hot, dry week came through in August, several of the plants wilted visibly during the afternoon, even though I was watering every evening. I could not figure out what I was doing wrong. The answer came from a conversation with an Amish gardener whose produce stand I stopped at that September. She had the most beautiful tomatoes I had seen all summer, and I asked her directly how she grew them. She walked me through her watering method. Deep soaking every 3 to 4 days. Heavy straw mulch between the plants. Water applied at the base of the stems only, never overhead. Morning timing when she could manage it. I said, I water every evening from above for 20 to 30 minutes. Yeah, she said, that is keeping the surface wet and keeping the roots near the surface. When the sun is strong, the surface dries quickly and the roots have nowhere to go. She said it without any judgment at all. Just as a fact, the way you tell someone they have their map upside down. I went home and changed everything that week. Deep watering every 3 days. Straw mulch applied immediately. Watering shifted to the base only. Within 2 weeks, the difference was visible in the plant growth. Within 4 weeks, I had stopped thinking about watering entirely because the mulched beds were holding moisture well enough that the 3-day schedule was handling itself almost automatically. I felt a little embarrassed that I had been watering wrong for a full growing season. But mostly I felt relieved that the fix had been that straightforward. Or 3 water management mistakes most gardeners make and what the Amish approach does instead. Mistake 1. Daily shallow watering that keeps roots near the surface. This is the most common and most damaging water management mistake in home gardening. Plants watered shallowly every day develop root systems concentrated in the top 2 to 3 inches of soil, the zone that dries fastest, heats most in summer, and has the least stable moisture and temperature conditions. These shallow-rooted plants stress during any dry period and produce smaller, less consistent yields than their deep-rooted counterparts. The Amish water deeply every 2 to 4 days because they understand that root depth is determined by where the moisture is, and they control where the moisture is. The fix is to water less frequently, more thoroughly, and at the base of the plant rather than the surface of the soil. I made this mistake for a full growing season before I understood what it was doing to my root systems. 2. Leaving soil bare between plants. Bare soil loses moisture through evaporation at the maximum possible rate. The full exposure of the soil surface to warm, dry air and direct solar radiation. An inch of surface moisture can evaporate from bare soil in hours on a hot summer day. The same moisture protected by 4 to 6 inches of straw mulch is available to plant roots days later. The Amish cover every inch of soil between plants with mulch because they understand that bare soil is losing water that the plants need, and that the mulch costs almost nothing compared to the water it protects. The fix is to apply straw mulch at 4 to 6 inches of depth immediately after planting and maintain that depth through the season as it compresses. 3. Overhead evening watering that leaves moisture on leaves overnight. Overhead watering in the evening, the default for most working gardeners, creates the extended leaf wetness conditions that fungal pathogens require to infect plant tissue. The overnight period with moisture on leaves and cooling temperatures produces the most favorable possible conditions for blight, mildew, and leaf spot. The Amish water at the base of plants and in the morning specifically because they have observed across generations that plants managed this way develop significantly less fungal disease than those watered from above in the evening. The fix is to move watering to the morning when possible and to water at the base rather than overhead regardless of timing. Here is what connects all 5 of these methods and why they work together as a complete system rather than as individual adjustments. Every water management practice the Amish use is an expression of the same underlying philosophy. Work with what the natural system wants to do rather than compensating for what it does when it is mismanaged. Water wants to move downward. Deep, infrequent watering works with that movement rather than trying to keep moisture artificially at the surface. Plant roots want to grow toward moisture. Deep watering trains those roots downward where soil conditions are better rather than keeping them at the surface where conditions are worst. Soil wants to hold moisture when organic matter is present. Annual compost application builds that organic matter year after year. Rain falls freely on every property. Collection systems capture what would otherwise be lost. The mulch protects the soil. The compost builds the soil. The deep watering trains the roots. The morning timing reduces disease. The rainwater collection eliminates dependence on external supply. Each element supports the others in a system that becomes more effective every season rather than requiring more effort to maintain. This is the closed loop applied to garden water management. Nothing wasted, everything working together. The investment of getting the system right in the first season paying back through every subsequent season with less labor, less water use, and better harvests than the shallow, reactive approach ever produced. Self-sufficiency in the garden includes water independence, building soil and water management systems that reduce dependence on municipal supply and that perform better during the dry conditions that every growing season eventually produces. 5 methods that together explain how Amish gardeners manage water to produce consistently better harvests. Deep, infrequent watering that builds root systems capable of accessing soil moisture through dry periods. Heavy straw mulching that protects that moisture between waterings. Morning timing that reduces fungal disease pressure on plant foliage. Rainwater collection that captures free water from every rainfall event. And annual compost application that permanently improves the soil's ability to absorb and retain moisture. None of these require expensive equipment. None of them require significant additional time. All of them produce measurable improvements in plant health and harvest quality that compound with every season they are applied consistently. Start with the mulch this week. 4 to 6 inches of wheat straw around your most moisture-sensitive plants. Water deeply the day you apply it, and then wait until the top 2 to 3 inches of soil have dried before watering again. That single change, mulching and switching to deep, infrequent watering, will show you more about what these methods produce than anything I can describe here. If this video gave you something you can use today, share it with a gardener who is watering every day and wondering why their harvest is not responding the way they expect. The Amish figured out the right approach to garden water management generations ago, and the results are visible in every productive season their gardens produce. Before you go, I want to ask you one question. What is your current watering schedule? How often do you water, and do you water from above or at the base of the plants? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone, and if your current schedule matches the common mistakes described in this video, I will tell you specifically which adjustment will make the biggest difference for your situation. And next week, I am going to show you exactly how Amish gardeners grow large vegetable harvests in surprisingly small spaces using planting methods that most backyard gardeners have never tried. The intensive spacing system, the companion combinations that maximize yield per square foot, and the one layout principle that determines how much food a bed can produce before the first seed goes in. If you want more food from the space you already have, this is the video that shows you how. That is next week. Be there.